The Army defines leadership as the process of influencing by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission and improve the organization.
That's Major Cal Waters, the CEO and founder of Intentional Leadership and the vice chair at the U.S. Army JAG Academy for Leaders.
At the end of the day, you can think about leadership as stewardship.
For nearly 2 decades, Cal has been in the business of building elite leaders, instructing our best and brightest in the U.S. military.
All great leadership is a byproduct of self-leadership.
The biggest battle in leadership is not fought in the battlefield or in boardrooms. It's fought inside ourselves.
There was a regret test that I did. If I don't do this, the only reason I'm not going to do this is because I'm afraid. It's really hard right now to exercise your intuition. You're swimming more upstream than ever before.
In this episode, we go into how Major Walters got started in leadership.
I had gotten in some trouble when I was in 8th grade, and I had a turnaround point in my life.
How he practices leadership at home.
I am a leader of my family right now. I want my children to be better than I found. I want my wife to be better because I love and care and giving them resources, giving them direction.
And where intuition intersects with leadership.
Intuition is a big part of self-leadership.
So let's dive into life with Major Cal Waters and learn about leadership and intuition from one of our country's best.
There's 3 parts to intuition.
Before we jump in, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here. This channel is small, but it's filled with high-quality people like you who care about growth, emotional intelligence, and becoming the kind of leader who's guided by intuition instead of noise and chaos. With everything happening in the world right now, emotional intelligence and being led by our intuition is more important than ever. If that resonates for you, just take 2 seconds and double check that you're subscribed. It really helps the health of a small channel like this. If you have entrepreneurs or professionals in your life who you care about, people navigating through growth, stress, leadership, burnout, or big decisions, please share this episode with them. A personal share will support our community more than any algorithm ever could. Let's be guided by your intuition and dive into today's episode. Cal, I'm so excited to have you on this podcast.
Well, thanks, Tom. I'm pumped to be here. It's a shout out to the lab for connecting us. I love it.
Yeah, Jay Klaus's lab. Anyone listening, definitely check it out. So Cal, tell me about the status of your military background. Right now, you're a major, right?
Yeah, I'm a major. I just actually got picked up a couple weeks ago for a lieutenant colonel. So hopefully I'll be pinning that on the next few months.
Yeah.
We'll see. So
Congratulations.
but I'm a major right now. Yeah.
And are you retiring soon?
I don't have specific plans to retire, but I will be at 18 years this summer. So you know how there's that magical 20-year mark where you can retire. So I think we probably will have more hard conversations to have in the next few years. But yeah, so I'm at 18 years, which just means I'm getting old, man. I'm being a lieutenant colonel, 18 years. It's hard to believe.
Yeah. Now, tell me a bit about your military background. Well, you were always officer, right?
Yeah, always officer. And it's funny, Tom, so I was probably 16 or 17. I had gotten in some trouble when I was like in 8th grade, and I had kind of a turnaround point in my life. And so I was 16, 17. I was in high school course, and I loved leadership. I'd become like the captain of my football team and the student body president. And I started getting these letters to play football at military academies. And one of them was West Point. And I didn't know what West Point was. And I remember asking my mom, like, Mom, what is West Point? And she said, that's the place where a bunch of really amazing leaders went to school. And I was like, oh, I'm intrigued. And so long story short, I ended up even not knowing anything about West Point, having no family that was military, deciding I'm going to go to West Point, mainly because I was interested in leadership.
Okay. Your leadership journey, or let me back up, your leadership interest started pretty young.
It did. Yeah. I think it was part of that turnaround for me. I guess it was junior year. I was trying to kind of turn my life around, and part of it was church related. And then I started to get more and more successful in the football field. And then that naturally, I think I made the varsity team when I was a sophomore. And then they started to talk about me being a captain. And then I just really embraced, like, I had been impacted by coaches and leaders. And then I started to see myself more as the leader because I was succeeding just mainly by example. I just really cared about like being an athlete and doing well. And so I started to see, wow, if I can lead myself, which is where I think all self leadership begins, and set an example, I can actually help other people. And I started to volunteer at the church. I started to volunteer in the community and just really believed in trying to make people's lives better. And I thought that leadership was the way to do that.
Gotcha. Now, and so you're real young, interested into leadership, and you're going through the practices of leadership. And naturally, now you're creating content, a podcast and other content around leadership. Tell
Yeah.
me where you're at with that.
Yeah. So it's funny, very quick version. I'll try to give it quickly. It's kind of hard to give it quickly, but basically 2019, I'd gone to West Point. I became an infantry officer, which means you go and you lead. I mean, it's like the stereotypical leadership position in the Army. I went to Ranger School, which is a leadership school, went to Iraq. Then I decided after I came back from Iraq, my wife and I were talking, she was like, Cal, you got to do something other than this. So I decided to go to law school and then was doing that within the Army. And I had this long commute. I was in Texas, outside of Austin, Texas, to the Army base. And I was prosecuting because I was an attorney at this point. And I would just listen to leadership podcasts and leadership books during that hour and a half time I had in the car every day. And then I started to get this feeling that I should start a podcast. And it was one of those feelings where I kind of felt like if I didn't do this, I would regret it. And so eventually I started the podcast. So that was back in 2019 and have continued it until today. And it's evolved into a business and a YouTube channel and some leadership products. And now I also, Tom, is crazy. My current job within the Army, so within not just the Army, but the JAG Corps, is I'm a leadership professor at the Army JAG School, which is crazy. It kind of
Oh,
combines these. So now I'm a leadership professor and I do my leadership business on the side.
okay. Awesome. So you're really getting the direct like leadership knowledge in the Army and then
Yeah.
also doing it in your personal life
Yeah.
with the podcast and everything. Okay.
Yeah.
What is your definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership is making people and teams better than you found them. And I
Okay.
think, I mean, ultimately how you do that is through influence. So I think often people define leadership as influence. That's how John Maxwell defines it. The Army defines leadership as the process of influencing by providing purpose, direction, and motivation to accomplish the mission and improve the organization. But I just think of
Purpose,
leadership,
direction. Say that again.
yeah,
Purpose, direction, and
providing
motivation.
purpose, direction, and motivation to
Okay.
accomplish the mission and improve the organization. But I
Okay.
think the reason I said making people, teams, and organizations better than you found them is I think at the end of the day, you could think about leadership as stewardship. Like if I am a leader of my family right now in the sense that I want my children to be better than I found them. I want my wife to be better just because and that's a process of influence and love and care and giving them resources, giving them direction. And so that's how I try to simplify it is ultimately making people, teams, and organizations better.
Gotcha. I guess, do you have a deeper definition of stewardship?
Ooh, have it deeper. I like that you go deep, man. This is good. I think stewardship is similar. I think I would describe stewardship as also taking what you're given. So you're given certain gifts, or you're given certain talents, you're given certain possessions, and caring for them and loving them and helping them be better than you found them. So I think I would probably define them very similarly.
Okay. Gotcha. Where does intuition intersect with leadership?
Intuition, and I was thinking about this actually on a run this morning because I knew we were going to hop on this conversation. I think intuition is a big part of self leadership. And I think all great leadership is a byproduct of self leadership. I think there's three parts to intuition. It's one, listening to yourself. It's two, knowing yourself. And then three, taking action, sometimes by yourself. And there's a lot of components to that. Because if I reflect back on my moments where I've either followed my intuition or I didn't follow my intuition, I was doing those three things. I was listening to myself. I was checking in with myself. So I was knowing myself. And then often I was taking some action, often by myself.
Yeah, I like that. I think what's interesting is I'm kind of reflecting of where I've been, and my intuition has been telling me like over the past few years to not do anything.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
what you're saying is kind of like the motivation to do it. Where really what that means is like, okay, then what was the motivation that I had before? If the intuition saying, don't do anything,
Yeah.
because there's almost, I'm like envisioning like a little angel and demon back and forth, like telling you where the intuition's like, don't, don't do anything. And then the demon's like, you got to prove your self-worth right now. You
Yeah.
got to,
Mm.
you got to, like well, you might not make more money anymore, or you're going to be a has-been or whatever it is.
Mm. Yeah.
And
I
so,
think that makes sense to me because I think that when I have not exercised my intuition, it was often doing something I wish I had not done. Like I was being pulled by some kind of external pressure to do something that ultimately wasn't in alignment with my values. If I really had challenged my thinking at the time, I wouldn't have done it. I would have known that it would have led to some form of regret. So I think
yeah,
not
yeah,
doing something could be the result of healthy exercise of intuition for sure.
yeah.
Because there's so many
It's,
good options out there. Often, sorry, but I think so often
go ahead.
the hard decisions are choosing between something that's good and something that's the best. It's not choosing between a bad option and a good option. And if you really want to be successful in life, and I think success is individually defined, choose the best over the good. Because there's gonna be a lot of good
Yeah,
options out there.
yeah. I think in a lot of cases, can you say that again? Like a good option versus the best option. Say that again. That's when leadership is coming in, or is that? Say
I
it again.
just think, yeah, I just think often, and I think this is absolutely true for leaders, and especially in the context of leading yourself, there are a lot of good options out there that you should say no to. And you're
And
doing
I
that
think,
because you're trying to choose the best option. And that's the
yeah,
difficult thing to find.
I, I, I think the where intuition really comes in for me is when the options are close. So
Mm.
when I was volunteering in the favelas of Brazil, helping teach kids jujitsu.
Mm.
And what I realized in my life, most of my options are not bad. It's usually really good
Yeah.
and pretty good.
Yeah.
And in some cases, I can be like, well, that sounds better or that one's better. But these kids in their life, it's like you either grow up and you sell drugs or you make $1 an hour as a waiter. These are both terrible. These are
Mm.
both terrible.
Yeah.
Where the thing is, in those situations, now that is a much harder situation of like, do I actually want to make money or do I, want to be working a harder job that's not making much money? So yeah, I think it's interesting that that's what's coming up in my mind when you say that of like, really, really kind of like splitting hairs almost of like, well, what's a good decision and like a even better decision?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think, Tom, people like you are the people that I love working with people who have already had success and they're really trying to figure out what does the next thing look like? Like, what does success look like at this stage of life? And often I do think that's going to be a product because at this point you have a lot of things you could do. We were talking before we even hopped on this. There's a lot of things you could do. And externally, it would probably look like success, but internally, it might
Mm.
not be success. And so that's what I mean by the good. Like externally, there'd be a lot of people saying, Tom, you're crushing it. Like, this is awesome. Wow, you're going to do this new thing. But internally, there would be some tension that you would be having to live with because you would know, this is good. Other people are telling me this is good, but this is not the best for me. This is not really where I wanted to be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I've hit that where there was a point where I was like, am I living the life that I want to live, or am I living the life that other people wish they could live?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah,
And we live with, I
and
think we live, I love that you're doing this too, this work on intuition, because I think it's really hard right now to exercise your intuition. I think you have to fight. You're swimming more upstream than ever before because there's a lot of noise, not you, but just all of us are, there's just a lot of noise and we're so aware of what other people are doing. And yes, I do think we
yeah,
can pull from what other people are doing and we can imitate to a certain extent, but we still have to listen to that part of our soul and our heart that says, no, this is the path that I'm on.
yeah. Can you tell me a story of when you did listen to your intuition?
When I didn't or when I did?
What you did?
What I did. Yeah, I think starting that podcast. 2019.
Okay.
So it was not normal for a Army officer JAG. I don't know any other Army officers, especially lawyers, who have a podcast. And it was not normal at the time to do that. But I felt like driving in my car, I would come home, Tom, and because I was listening to these audiobooks and I was listening to these podcasts on leadership, and I would come home and I would talk to my wife about it. I was like, hey, sweetie, I was learning about this, or I was sharing this story or this biography I just finished. And she would listen, but then finally she'd be like, Cal, like you need an outlet of something. Like I
He's
love
like, I
you.
need an outlet.
I
I need
need
an
it.
outlet.
Yes, yes. And so I realized that I had a lot to share, and it was kind of like it was just welling up inside of me. It had to come out.
Mm,
And I also started to think, well, I think there are some people that could benefit from this. And then I had a friend who started a podcast. So a guy in my area, like right outside Austin. So it was interesting. It was the first time I had a friend that I knew that had a podcast. I was like, oh, that's something that
mm,
people can do. So it was that combination of seeing what's possible through a friend with feeling the internal, I need to do this. And then I
mm,
also think there was a little bit of a regret test that I did that said, if I don't do this, the only reason I'm not going to do this is because I'm afraid and I'm going to
mm.
regret it. I'm going to know that I should have done this thing. And the only reason I am not doing it is because I'm worried about what other people think. And so I followed my intuition. I'm really glad I did. It changed me in a lot of important ways internally, because I then became someone who did things that I really wanted to do, even though I was afraid. And I think that was an important growth moment for me. And so in some ways, it kind of changed my identity. It changed how I saw myself, because I'd done a lot right up until that point, but a lot of it was the normal path. Like I'd go to West Point, I'd go to school, I'd go infantry, I go to Ranger School, I deploy, I go to law school. And all of that felt successful. And I guess in some ways it was successful, but this was the first time that no one was telling me to go do this. This was me telling myself, I need to do this. And so that was, and going back to that 3-step piece that I talked about, I think it's listening to yourself. What's showing up internally. It's knowing yourself. So knowing yourself to the point of, what are my values? Am I going to regret not doing this? Or am I going to regret doing this? Who do I want to be in the future? Like kind of checking in with your future self. And then it's that third step of taking some action, however small, often by yourself. And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did.
Now, once you basically decided to go down this journey, I mean, now you're over 100 episodes in your podcast, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've been meeting a lot of people, and this has been a long journey. What has been something you've been really proud of or excited about that has been across this journey that you didn't expect?
Yeah. I didn't expect any of it. And that's the thing. I just knew I should do it, and I knew I would enjoy it. And I knew and so all the people that I've met, I didn't even anticipate it being an interview show. I started out just sharing my own learnings, the things that I've been sharing with my wife.
Okay. So
And
you weren't even interviewing.
no,
You're just kind of dumping on the camera to
I
give
was
your
like, hey,
questions.
hey, I just read this book. Let me talk to people out in the world about this. And so I started doing
Okay.
that. And then and I think my first interview was a friend. And then I reached out to an author. And then I remember I reached out to I think he was a 3-star general in charge of West Point at the time. And I was like, there's no way he'll say yes. And he said yes. And next thing I know, I'm hopping on. And that felt impossible at the time for that to be real. And then that built into other authors and other leaders. And I started learning so much. And then people that I worked with and work with now would come up to me and say, Cal, I've been listening to your podcast and I love it. I'm learning. And then I get emails. And so I get a lot of emails now and phone calls, and people come up to me. And so I never anticipated any of that. And it brings me a lot of joy and a lot of energy to do it. And so I didn't expect it. And it kind of goes back to one small little experiment led to a lot of stuff I never imagined. And now that is probably my biggest passion, is trying to build on that and continue to lean into it, because I know there's alignment between who I want to be, where I want to go, type of work that brings me energy. And that's another thing, Tom, I think we have to pay attention to. That goes to that second part of knowing yourself, is what brings you joy? What gets you excited? What do you have to do? What work makes you feel alive?
Yeah.
Where do you see that nice Venn diagram between things you are passionate about, things that you're actually good at, that you can add value, and that it actually makes the world better. I think if you can find that, then pay attention to it. And for me, that's the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So say again, your the first person you interviewed was a 3-star general?
No, the first person I interviewed was a friend of mine. His name's Ryan Brentz.
Okay.
And then I think I interviewed another friend of mine who was this avid reader. So I was just interviewing people that were interesting to me who actually were leading well. And then I
Okay.
reached out. So yeah, he was
You had
probably
some
my
you had some
fourth or fifth
warm-ups before
interview.
the
Yeah,
3.
yeah, I did. And I
Okay.
think that's important. I think that you've
No,
probably
that's
seen
really
this.
important.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
you experiment. You kind of the floor increases slowly of what's possible. Like you think that you could never do an interview, and then you figure out the tech, and you're like, oh, okay, I kind of I'm comfortable now to at least get on an interview. I know that I won't completely fail, and then you get a little bit more confidence to go to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I've seen some podcasts, some how-to podcasts, and they're like, you got to set this tone with the first person, and it's got to be
Yeah.
like, let me just try it out the
Yeah.
software, you know?
No, yeah. I think, yeah, that's why I love thinking about it as experiments, because often I think people probably don't follow their intuition, especially on big things, because it feels just too overwhelming. There's too much fear. There's too many things that could go wrong. But a little small action, I think, goes a long way. And you can always iterate, as you probably will iterate as you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I think there's people feel with the intuition, like it could be a big calling, but sometimes you can just make baby steps to the calling.
Yeah.
You might be
Yeah.
saying, quit your job. And it's like, you don't have to tell, like, give your boss the bird right then and there. You can be like, let me just kind of like search around for some other jobs, or,
Yes. Yeah.
are my
Yeah.
finances squared away? It doesn't have to be, jumping
Yeah.
off the deep
And
end.
this is checking in with yourself. This is like, okay, what are my values? How do I want to show up? Jim Collins talks about this in his book, Good to Great. He talks about shooting bullets and like shooting a lot of bullets and seeing if you're hitting something and then shoot cannonballs. So it's this idea of like
Oh,
experiment, experiment, experiment. And then once you have validated the idea, all right, now let's throw some cannonballs at it. Cause now you've done some focused but small effort and you're getting good response.
yeah. I like that. That's cool. So Cal, tell me a story about when you did not listen to your intuition. This is
There were
always
a
a longer
lot,
list.
because there were a lot of them that popped up. One small example that I thought of, my wife and I, I decided to go to law school, and I was going through the Army, which means the Army was going to pay for my law school. So I wasn't going to go into any student debt, which is awesome. I they were paying for my law school and they were paying me while I was in law school. So anyway, all that's context. We were married at that point for about 5 years. She was done with school. And we had no debt at all, which was just a really peaceful place to be in. We just bought our first, well, the only debt we had was our mortgage. And so we just bought a house. And I remember just for some reason, I got this in my head. I was like, I want to buy a new car. Why? And so long story short, we ended up buying a new Lexus that we financed. And it was silly. It was stupid. It was one of those situations where I was in no debt, no consumer debt. And I went and sold a perfectly good car, used car, and got a new car. And it ultimately worked itself out. But at the time, I was really passionate about investing, compounding interest, being smart and
Right.
simple about like setting my future up. And there was something about like this external success that I was trying to demonstrate that made me want to buy this new car. It wasn't this internal thing. It was an external thing.
Ah,
A-
okay.
And I wish I hadn't done it. And honestly, it led us to a few other kind of poor car decisions. And I think that's a great example, going back to that 3-step model that I was highlighting of listen to yourself, know yourself, and then if appropriate, take action by yourself. So for me, I really wasn't listening to myself because this was all external. Internal was saying, don't do this. And then knowing myself, if I'd really checked in with my values, my future self, it would have said, Cal, at the time, I was actually teaching people to stay out of debt. I was teaching people the power of compounding interest. I was teaching people the importance of like throwing every little bit of disposable income into something that's going to accrue over time. It was silly. And another thing I think that's noteworthy about following your intuition is if it's actually from you. something you should do, you will allow yourself to be challenged on it and you will allow yourself to be tested on it. Going back to the podcast, if no one could have talked me out of that, I would have been, if Tom, if you and I were to sit down and have a conversation, you'd be like, "How this doesn't seem like a great idea." I'd be like, "Let me tell you why it's a great idea. Let me tell you why I have to do this." But if we were to sit down and if I would have had to explain why I needed to buy this car, it would have quickly broken down. Like as an attorney, like you could have cross-examined me. I'd be like, I got nothing. I got no good answer. It's all stupid. It's all external.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I
Okay.
think when we're actually following our inner compass, not some external compass that someone else is giving us, that's another telltale sign is can we defend it? It consistent with our values. Cause I would have told you my values of, hey, these are what I want to do. And then you would have said, Cal, this doesn't align. This doesn't make any sense. And I would have said, yeah, you're probably right. I shouldn't do this. But I think it also highlights the fact that we can talk ourselves into really bad ideas if we're being driven by
Yeah,
some external force.
gotcha. So if you the voice of buy a new car, do financing or whatever. What was that? You're saying that was not the intuition? Then what was that?
I think it was some extra, I was trying to fill some void of, I needed to feel successful for some reason. I think I was comparing myself to other people and it made me feel good to be financially successful. Like I needed other people to know that for some reason. I don't know. And I probably need to explore that more, but there was some desire for external validation. I don't know.
So you're saying you became financially stable or at least safe and secure, and you almost like wanted other people to know that.
I think, yeah, I think so. And I also, yeah, I think that's it. That's well articulated. I also think I was we bought a new house. We were around a bunch of other people who were successful in business. And I think I probably felt a little bit insecure about the army because the army, it just felt not as sophisticated as the people I was around who were working at these tech companies. And it was a comparison thing. And I think we have to be very careful with comparison am I doing this purely to try to impress someone else, or am I trying to live in alignment with the things that I value the most in my future self?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about comparison because there's pros and cons with comparison. You can learn how to grow, and then you
Yeah.
can destroy yourself through comparison.
Yeah. Yeah.
So so as long as we're like doing comparison in a healthy way versus a destructive way,
Yeah.
then you know,
That's why we need a filter. So one of the things that I walk leaders through my core values course, and it goes through three different exercises: a eulogy exercise, a top moments exercise, and a key people exercise. And I think if you do that level of reflection, and you don't have to do a eulogy. You could do like an 80th birthday exercise of like, what do you want people to say about you when you're 80 or 85? And if you do that level of reflection, you build in a filter for what you're seeing on the outside. So I can see what you're doing. I see what Tom's doing. I love what Tom's doing. But then I have done all this internal work to think through what I truly desire. And then I can filter it. I can say, okay, that's cool. I'm going to be inspired by that, but I'm constantly filtering it through what I know I value. It's trying to get at your deepest desires because I think we're a mixed bag of desires. We have good desires, bad desires. And it's important to distinguish between our strongest desires and our deepest desires. So when I get home at the end of the day, my strongest desire is to do nothing. I just want to sit on my phone. I want to veg out. But my deepest desire is to show up with the same amount of energy to my family that I just brought to work. I want to serve my family. I want to do the dishes. I want to check in with my wife. I want to be present with my kids, play on the ground with them. That's my deepest desire. And if I'm not careful, my strongest desire will overtake my deepest desire. So what we're trying to do with those exercises is get at our deepest desires so we can filter what we see on the outside with what's actually going on the inside. And I think if we can choose more often than not our deepest desire, we're going to end up being successful, but not necessarily in some external way. We're going to have more peace because we're showing up consistent with how the things we value the most.
really kind of using that as your North Star, your
Yeah.
deepest desire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Eh,
Yeah.
And are
But I
you
think it
are you
takes a lot of
s-
work to do that because there's parts of the brain or the work that you're really getting into. And I've learned about this as I've taught emotional intelligence. I mean, you're kind of getting into that default mode network of the brain, which is where like the kind of subconscious thinking happens. And if we can get our deepest desires really clear, if we do a lot of work, that default mode network has a better sense of the things that you actually value, not what
Yeah.
you think you value.
You're really building habits into your deeper desires.
Yes, you are. Yeah. And you have a lot more clarity, but it's an internal sense of clarity. And so, yeah, over time, I think those neural pathways form to where you actually start to desire the things that you really care about. And it's easier to live in a world of comparison with more peace when you do that. But most people I have found, and I'm not meaning for this to be critical, I just think it's the world that we live in. It's really hard to set aside the time to do that work. And as I have worked with leaders, I've noticed when they do the work, they're really glad they did. And they feel a lot more peace and they feel a lot more confidence about their unique path of their own.
Yeah. Who's your favorite leader and why?
Mm. I really love, you can laugh at me for this. I really love Colin Powell. I really do.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason
No,
I
that
say you're
makes
gonna
sense.
laugh is I've posted about him a lot on LinkedIn. I so Colin
Those
Powell,
those posts are the best.
and I love Colin Powell because he's a modern leader that people know. I think he represents someone who came from, you know, not what you would expect. The path that he went on was not necessarily what people would have predicted, but he seemed to have that inner compass that I'm talking about. He seemed to really know how he wanted to show up. People around him really respected him deeply. So that's one. And then I would say Lincoln. I mean, I love reading about Lincoln and studying Lincoln. It blows my mind that he was able to have the level of resilience and the wisdom to act in the way he did at a time where there was so many ways that he could have gone wrong. I mean, to make the decisions he made, to have the resilience. So I have a lot of admiration for him. And I think he is a great example of wisdom, which is the ability to navigate the complexities of life with competence, which is really hard to do.
Cool. What's your thoughts of Napoleon? I'm here in Paris, and there's his
Yeah.
like grave or temple is here, so I wanted
Yeah.
to go visit it.
Yeah. I have studied Napoleon at a distance. I don't feel like I'm able to talk intelligently about him. I don't know. What do you think? What are your thoughts on Napoleon as a current French resident?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm just wondering, like, what was he really motivated by? Was it? I mean, he's kind of the epiphany of little man syndrome, you know,
Yeah.
and and he's the greatest conqueror ever, but people still know him as being short. Like, was that any form of motivation, or maybe that's just kind of like a funny thing that
Is there
developed?
something that we reflect on from history?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Like, what
what
was his motivation? You know?
one thing again, I haven't studied him that much, but one thing I've noticed is that he had very clear maxims of how he wanted to operate. I think that's one thing I've noticed with leaders as well, is they develop mantras or maxims. I was just listening this morning to a podcast about Jeff Bezos and how his team knew the principles that he wanted to operate on. And I think you see that with a lot of these founders that we kind of idolize, that they're very clear on what they want and they communicate that to the people around them. And it's almost like these little sticky phrases that people can latch onto to say, oh, okay, well, that's what we believe, that's what we value, that's how we want to show up. And they can almost repeat what the leader says because they say it so much and they're
Yeah,
so simple and clear about it. So I think that's another part of the core values exercise that I do is help people have that level of clarity about themselves so that they can remember it. Like when I get off course in life, I can just check in with my core values and it helps me get back on course.
yeah. I interviewed someone who had a moving company,
Mm.
and he was saying that he would hire a lot of college kids, and naturally he got into hiring fraternity brothers. And I was like, "Oh, that's a great idea. Was it good? Like they work well?" He's like, "No, no, no. He's actually the ones that worked well was the athletes." He's like,
Ah,
"These guys would show up late, hungover, whatever." He's like, "But what they were good for is that they all had the way they would communicate, their community culture
the
was really
language.
good for that.
Yeah.
The language,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Yeah.
they would say the core values to each other, or they would
Yeah.
they would have like internal dialogue that was
Yeah.
useful to support the culture.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of what you're saying with these leaders, how they're you know having these mantras or these slogans that they can say to each other to
Yeah.
keep each other working together and moving in the same direction.
Yeah, it allows people in the team to exercise intuition, but it's like within these boundaries of, hey, this is what we care about. I don't have to tell you to go do that because you already know that that's what we value and that's how we operate.
Right, right. Yeah, you know the mantra. I mean, in
Yeah.
the Air Force, we have the three core values. It's integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do.
There you
I'm
go.
sure
You got it.
the Air Force, or the Army has something similar.
Yeah, ours spell leadership.
Okay, okay.
It's like this acronym, so it's like loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. So
Oh,
those are
that's
our
awesome.
values. Yeah, which are actually really
Cool.
good. It's just sometimes people joke because it's like, those can't really be our core values when they actually spell leadership.
Yeah. But a funny story. I was working with another company that had a product similar to mine,
Yeah.
and the main guy is in the Marines, and there was a part on his product through the factory process. I was like, it'd be cool if we put like the company core values here, because it's part of the machine, the factory process, and it wouldn't cost any more money, and it kind of help with the customers liking the brand. He'd be like, yeah, that's a great idea. And I go, yeah, we could put it in here, integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. And his partner looks at me and goes, wow, those are great. Did you just come up with those? I go, yeah, that'd be awesome. And I had to tell him, I was like, no, those are actually the Air Force core values. I can't. I was like, it'd be so funny if like a Marine had a product with the Air Force core values and didn't know it.
We used to talk at West Point, the mission, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like to inculcate, they use like that big word, the values, but you have fully inculcated the values of the Air Force. I love it.
Yeah.
But you remember them,
So
and that's good. I often tell
yeah.
people too that, so one of the exercises we do with core values is I have them attach a habit to each of the values. So for
Oh,
me, like my first value is really faith. And so every morning I, make it a point to pray, to journal, to read scripture. My second core value is serve. And the habit I attach to that is to wash the dishes every day. And so it's small, but it's just a way to say, am I putting into action these things that I purportedly value? And so I bring that up because I think a lot of organizations and even individuals have values, but the next step, and I think this kind of builds that intuition muscle, is when you make sure that it's showing up in a consistent way, even in a small way.
so Cal, the leaders out there listening to this podcast, what would you want to tell them about intuition?
Yeah, I think so. When I teach emotional intelligence, are you super familiar with emotional intelligence, Tom? How much work have you done on that? I don't want to.
I mean, I call it awareness, but yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like there's a lot of overlap if it's not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. And I think so emotional intelligence, the way we teach it is it starts with self-awareness. And the best leaders are self-aware. And so I would tell them a big part of being self-aware is knowing yourself. There was this study done by Bain where they found that, because we often think of inspirational leaders having to be these hyper charismatic characters that can get up and command a room. Studies demonstrate that you can be an inspirational leader if you're authentic. And you're going to be authentic if you can live in alignment with the things that you value the most. This all goes back to what we talked about with intuition. It's listening to yourself. So listening to the things that you know you should do. I have another example about me not following my intuition as a leader. Then knowing yourself. So like it goes to like checking in with your core values, checking in, doing the regret test. Like, am I going to regret doing this, not doing this in the future, or doing this in the future? And then taking some action. And so I think if leaders can follow that, they'll be successful, because intuition is a key part of leading. And I would also say view any decision. There's almost every single decision you can change after you've done it, or you can adjust. And the best leaders have the humility to say, okay, I thought we were going to go in this direction, but the environment has changed, or now that I'm getting some data on this, we need to make. So you can always adjust it. So be willing to make decisions in alignment with your values and the vision of the organization and the vision of whatever your vision, and then be willing to make adjustments, which requires a lot of humility and intuition also to make adjustments along the way.
I like what you're saying about authenticity, because I think of the difference between like when you're not authentic, what is absent between someone who's authentic and then when that same person is not authentic.
Yeah.
And I think the simple way to put it is it boils down to a lack of trust.
Mm.
I'm not authentic because I don't trust you'll receive me as my authentic self. And I
Yeah.
think that
Well
that
said.
key part of trust is another element that is within the intuition. Like, why did you not listen to your intuition? Because it sounded crazy and insane, and I basically didn't trust it.
Yeah.
So, so
Yes.
like really practicing that self trust
Yeah.
is
Right.
really what that muscle where I feel like authenticity is really the a great muscle to work with intuition. And
Yeah.
I see it as like also to speak to trust is I see a lot of times like the key difference between courage and confidence. Like courage is to me to really simplify it is action plus fear. I'm
Mhm.
terrified, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you started your podcast, there was no fear. There was like, well, I'm going to just try it. And you're like interviewing someone terrified. There's actually a deep level of trust. So confidence
Mm.
is action plus trust.
Mm.
So if you think of those two different types of people that would walk into a job interview, someone who's courageous versus someone who's confident, that's a completely different interview.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that the way you frame that. And I do think, I mean, we've all probably seen leaders who you could just tell they're trying to be someone they're not. Like they're copying something they saw, or they're forcing it. And we can sense that. I think people would rather follow a leader that's real than one who is always trying to be right. And I think that takes, like you said, a level of confidence in yourself. Like, hey, I know who I am. I know how I want to show up. I'm not perfect, but my intentions are good. And I think that comes across as authentic, and people will follow that all day. And people are inspired by that. I thought about this morning. It made me think about, like, what do I really think about intuition? Have you studied the neuroscience of it?
No, I would love to. When you ask me about my emotional intelligence, my key thing is I meditate a lot and I'm like
Mm,
constantly like my personal awareness is growing through meditating. So when it comes to specifically emotional intelligence, I kind of view it as like
mhm.
a larger topic where awareness is a
Yeah,
part of that.
yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, for
uh,
sure. Well, it made
so
me think
I'm
of, because in emotional intelligence, we often focus on, I want to not be controlled by my emotions. I want to move most often from like the executive mode network, where I want to access the prefrontal cortex to decide, to choose how I'm going to act in a particular situation. But as I was researching before this, and I was just thinking about the three different networks, like the executive, the default mode network, and the salience, it seems like a lot of times when we're accessing intuition, it's going to be from that default mode network. It's like when you're in the shower and all of a sudden you have this great idea, or you're on a walk and like a great idea pops in. But I still think there's the prefrontal cortex version of it where it's like, okay, I have the idea, but now I am doing a little bit more just deliberate thinking. It's kind of what like Daniel Kahneman talks about with like thinking fast and slow.
There was one thing I wanted to say is it was on a Facebook post. There was a guy said the intuition speaks in statements, your
Mm,
anxiety speaks in questions.
mm,
So it'll say start the podcast versus should you start a podcast?
mm. Man, I could talk to you about this all day, because I get questions even based on that. Because I think for me, fear, in my mind, fear comes often after. Like, even if I can, like, the podcast. This is just talking about my experience. I wanted to do the podcast. I thought I should do the podcast, and then I did start to feel the external. And part of this might just be my personality, and maybe some people struggle with this more. But I start to feel the external doubters say, "Don't do this," or "You shouldn't do this." And that's where I think you have to have like the right mindset to kind of push through the resistance. Have you read The War of Art? Like Stephen Pressfield's idea of, like,
I know of it. I
yeah,
haven't
I mean,
read it.
just kind of like, if you even, he talks about basically the closer to the soul the idea is, the more resistance you'll feel. And so that's kind of how I've experienced it, where I'll get the idea, but then I'll experience the resistance, whether external, but there's enough conviction around the idea that I need to do it. So I can push through it almost, as opposed to not having it at all. Like, I haven't experienced it where I don't feel any resistance, if that makes sense. So I guess the way I received what you said was, there won't be any anxiety if it's the right thing. but I have experienced it where there's always a little tinge of, and maybe anxiety. Maybe I didn't experience it as anxiety. I guess the more I think about it, there was peace internally, but there was still like fear that creeps in. I was like, oh man, or just
Yeah,
like, man, this is gonna be hard. This is gonna be uncomfortable. Like I'm having to do something I haven't done before. Like all those kind of feelings.
I like what you're saying. Okay, so I would say so. It's not a either or. It's not like if I hear the intuition. I actually the way I view it is it's almost like if we were at a restaurant and you're talking to me and the music's way too high, you can't hear me.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the music is anxiety, where some people would think the problem I see with intuition is that people think, how do I hear the intuition better? Because if we're at that restaurant, you wouldn't give me a megaphone. Like the music's too loud. Let me get a megaphone in you. You would say simply turn down the music. The reason why you can't hear your intuition is because the anxiety is too loud.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if we're able to, like you mentioned, peace, like if
Hmm.
you could hear the intuition when you had peace. So
Hmm.
really the root is like, how do we get to peace?
Hmm. Yeah, that's
And
good.
then so if we're able to like whatever you're feeling anxiety over, like rejection, like you said, you're getting doubters or whatever. I mean, the fear is potentially failure, which for me, the reason why I was like afraid to fail was because I thought people would have a negative opinion of me or be rejected. The reason why I didn't care, like I was worried about rejection, was that I didn't want them to leave. I didn't want them to abandon
Mm.
me.
Yeah,
So really, my fear of failure, it wasn't really about failure. It was actually my fear of abandonment.
man, that's deep, and it makes sense. And when you understand that, you're able to process that effectively. Yeah, when you started talking about I was thinking about that idea of like noise versus signal, and how
Yeah.
the noise. And there's another guy, Benjamin Hardy. If you're studying his stuff, he's written a bunch of.
Oh,
He wrote like The Future Self Now. He wrote 10x is easier than 2x. He just wrote a book called
okay.
Scaling, the Science of Scaling. But he's a psychologist, but he talks a lot about the importance of a big goal and how it becomes a filter. So we often, the way he describes it, there's three types of time. There's the past, there's the future, and the present. Most of us, if we're not
Yeah.
careful, we plan from the past. It's like, okay, this is what I've messed up in the past, or this is where I was. So we're filtering from the past. He says actually the most powerful way to filter is from the future. And if you have a big goal, it becomes a filter for your present. And then you're more easily able to decipher the noise from the signal. Like, okay, well, that's just noise. So that's not actually taking me towards my goal. And that's actually signal because it's filtered through my future goal. But
Yeah.
I love the work you're doing, man. I think that this is a really important topic that I don't hear a lot of people talking about. So
Yeah.
keep it up,
Thanks.
man.
For what you're saying with the concept of like future, have you read Power of Now,
No,
Eckhart Tolle?
no.
I highly would recommend that. He's all about presence.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and because like I hear what you're saying of like planning for the future. There's the
Mm.
point where we need to plan for the future,
Yes,
but
yes.
the thing is, peace comes from presence, and
From
really anything
presence.
from
Yeah,
anxiety is coming from the future.
yeah,
If you, any
yeah,
fear and anxiety is fully from the future,
yeah, yeah. I
because
know.
you're worried about like what may happen or what
Yeah.
like what you're saying of well, I had some doubters. Like, what are they doubting? It might not
Mm,
work.
mm.
Well,
Yeah.
it's working right now, or it
Yes.
hasn't worked
Yeah.
yet. Like you're working on it now. So
Yeah. Yes.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That has been the tension as I've tried to adopt that idea. I'd love to talk to Benjamin Hardy about it. It's like, well, how does that not lead to, I can see how that helps you get clarity if you have the right goal, but how do you still live in the present if you are being driven by the future? Because I do agree with you. I think when I think about when I am most happy, it's when I'm present. It's like when I'm with my kids, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to do. I'm not on my phone. I'm just literally on the floor playing with Legos. If I'm doing the dishes, I'm not even listening to a podcast. I'm just doing the dishes. Like this morning, I was just running. I wasn't listening. So anyway, I think there is something there. I don't know how he would say you manage that tension between the future and the present. I'll have to check out that book because I do 100%. Who is that? Who's a Buddhist? It talks about like when you're eating the orange, you should be eating the orange. Like when you're watching this, I just love that concept. Like, yes, that is so true. Like if you don't
yeah.
do that, you're missing life.
Yeah. That's exactly what Eckhart Tolle talks about.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is they're not. the two groups of like Eckhart Tolle and the meditation stuff I was doing is called Vipassana.
Yeah.
They don't like Eckhart Tolle. I've seen him talk about Vipassana one time, and
Uh-huh.
Vipassana doesn't like advertise his books, but his book is like the instruction manual for the 10-day meditation retreat.
Mm.
It's just like all about like being present. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think like you were saying, the past and the future, I think that a lot of times we're kind of ping-ponging back and
Hmm.
forth over the present because we're like worried about, the last relationship I was in was terrible, so now I'm afraid to get in another relationship.
Yeah.
The last
Yeah.
job was whatever it was.
Yeah.
The
Right.
last business
Yeah.
partner did this, and now it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, can you be here right now?
Yeah.
And you missed all these red flags because you weren't present with the last business partner. If you be present right now, you can see this guy's not going to work out, or maybe it is going to work out. I don't know.
Yeah. 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 Man, that's so true. And maybe what he would say to that is like the way to have the best present is to get really clear about what you want in the future. Like if I don't know,
Maybe
but I
like,
see
what
the
do you want
downsides
right
of that as
now?
well. Yeah, but isn't that hard to clarify? Like if we're not careful, our now is so influenced by the past that we can't get out of that mindset. It's like I'm constantly thinking
But to
about
be
like,
fair
okay,
on that, your development of the future is also created by the past. So
true.
to
Yeah.
sit here and say, well,
Yes. Yeah.
present's all based on the past. Well, so is your future. If you're gonna,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you can't, there's no way you could completely separate that. You're right. Man, it's fascinating. I like to nerd out on this stuff. I think it's because I think it's how we live our lives. And if we can be intentional about it, but there are some tensions that I'm trying to figure out in my mind. I think one thing I keep seeing over and over again pop up is this idea of two things can be true at once. And I see that in so many different areas. But how to live with that reality is kind of hard.
yeah, yeah. I think two things can be true at once, but I like, for me, something that was like true was I wanted to grow the company Grip Mat.
Hmm.
Also, what was true was I wanted external validation. So the thing is, these things are true at the same time. Like now, I want to get this word out. Will I get external validation? There's a high chance it'll happen, but like I'm not rooted in needing
Yeah,
that. So I
yeah,
think both can live at the same time,
yeah,
but like I can be let go of one,
yeah,
at least let go more of one. Just like,
yeah,
okay, well, let's just trade
yeah.
this thing.
Yeah, I think it's that difference between want and need. Like you can want something and not need it. If you need it,
True.
it's like, oh man, okay, there might be something I need to I need to get some healing in this area. Like I shouldn't need this, but like, would it be nice if people said good things about me? Of course, like that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, but yeah, but do I need someone to say nice things about me?
Yeah, right.
Because it's tied to my identity. It's tied to my
Yeah,
self-worth.
right. Yeah,
Hal, tell me I'm doing a good job because
right. Well, I love
now
how
you're like, I
you
really don't want to tell you you're doing. I mean, yeah, it's good.
right. Well, you can tell when someone like really needs it, and you're like, oh man, now I don't know if I can. But I like how you also, I can tell you've done some of that inner work because you were able to clearly articulate what was underneath some of that stuff, which I
Yeah.
think is the work of going to the past that we absolutely need to do. It's hard to do to say like,
I
where does this even come from?
I think so. When I meditate, okay, so there's a thing that I'll do is I call it my school, and I'm the teacher, and my emotions are my students.
Mm,
And if you've ever seen someone who splits a classroom, like for whatever reason, girls over here, guys over here, or whatever, I feel like we naturally do that. Of these are good emotions, the emotions.
yeah,
I want to be happy. I want to be
yeah.
joyful,
More of
excited.
this. Yeah, yeah,
More
yeah.
of those. What I'm not allowed to have is
The
sadness,
negatives. Yeah,
depression,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
So I just let the kids come and they can sit wherever they want. They can mix. I
Mm,
envision it as like blue is good, red is bad, and I
mhm,
basically let them mix into purple. Now, sometimes I'll have an emotion, and I just accept myself to have it, and then there may be a different emotion. Like a lot of times, one will be like, "I'm angry." Why I'm
mhm,
angry? Because I actually feel hurt. I'm sad. So anger comes in first, and then sadness comes in next. And the thing is, I see a lot of people, they'll be like, why am I feeling this way? And then they're looking through the past of like, oh, well, here's the evidence of why I'm feeling this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe that the answer of why you're feeling the emotion, it'll come when it's ready. You actually have to like seek it out and figure it out. It'll be there whenever it's ready. Because what happens is people will be feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm sad. But why am I sad? Well, I do have daddy issues, and my mom, she left at this time, and she never told me I loved it. And then now they're just like, we just had this, like, the emotions were just coming out. You're like,
yeah, I don't want to go there. Yeah. Oh man, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. It makes me think of a article I read. It was Tasha Eurich, and she was saying, asking the question why is actually not helpful.
Your past and the why, it is important, but it'll come when it needs to be. It doesn't need to be the focus. So Cal, where can we find your leadership courses, or your leadership content?
Yeah, go to calwalters.me, and that's where I have all my podcasts. I've got my course there, a core values course. And then you can find me on LinkedIn and also YouTube, or where I spend most of my time.
Wasn't that amazing? I get so energized by conversations like this. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and sharing with those who you care about. It's one of the easiest ways to support a small channel like this. It helps us reach more leaders like yourself who want to grow in emotional intelligence and intuition. Before you go, I'd love to invite you to my Saturday newsletter, a 5-minute weekly read to sharpen your intuition and strengthen your emotional intelligence. It's where I share all my deepest insights, both personal and as an entrepreneur. Click below on the top link in the description. Let's keep this momentum going and check out this next episode. It's one of my favorites, and it's the next step in your growth journey. Just one click away. I'll be there waiting for you.